Hi guys, good morning or good afternoon. We don't know when you're going to be watching this presentation. Today we will be presenting action research and our team is integrated by Alondra Juarez, Laura Lopez, and I, Elizabeth Lisaola. Okay, so this is a little roadmap or our content that we will be sharing with you today. The first point is action research, the origins of action research. Then we have some scholar definitions, the understanding of the cycle, some areas of interest, data collection methods, data analysis, presenting findings, and well, at the end, we will have a small and brief conclusion. Okay, so let's begin. Um, we have Kurt Lewin, he coined what was action research. He was an American psychologist, and he stated the field theory of behavior. Okay, so he was German, and he was an American. Well, he eventually became American psychologist, right? So the field theory of behavior is expressed to a sort of a cycle in which we tend to reflect in this process of action research. Okay, so it's a cycle where we stop to think, to reflect, and then we constitute like a small hypothesis, sorry, and then we go on further on and we do like a strategy to work on that specific area that we were reflecting on, and then we get a conclusion, and then the cycle is repeated as many times as you need to. And it's not just in education, it could be in many different aspects of life. Okay, now we want to know what action research is, right? So we were talking about this theory of behavior. So what we want to do right now is we want to define what action research is. So it's basically, it refers to a wide variety of evaluative, investigated, and analytical research methods designed to diagnose the problems. That's what I was mentioning before. It's just a cycle. Okay, so this can help educators develop solutions, or even investigators. Now that we're going to be talking about our small research project for the end of the semester, this is quite a good tool for you to approach your investigation at the end of the semester. Okay. We have some scholars who define action research as, first we have McThion and Jung in 1990, define action research as a systematic inquiry that is collective, collaborative, self-reflective, critical, and undertaking by participants in the inquiry. On the other hand, Willis 2014 defines action research as humans can better understand their world or make better decisions if they systematically collect data carefully and analyze it. Okay, then we have Rappaport, 1970, who says that action research aims to contribute both to the practical concerns of people in an immediate problematic situation and to the goals of social science by joint collaboration within a mutually acceptable ethical framework. And we also have Kemmis and McTaggart, 1990, a form of collective self-reflective inquiry undertaken by participants in social situations in order to improve the rationality and justice of their own social or educational practices, as well as their understanding of these practices and the situation in which these practices are carried out. So as you can see, action research is a practice that seems to analyze and reflect on certain circumstances or problems you confront. Okay? To understand this better, this is the cycle of action or cycle of inquiry. Okay, so the first stage that you should be aware of is identifying the problem to be studied. In this case, we're going to be doing an investigation project. So it's very important for you to identify the problem that you want to study. Like in this case, what would be the research question that we did last week or the week before, okay? What you wanted you to write your thesis about, but in this case, well, now it's going to be only well, just a small research project, right? Okay, then you're going to collect the data on the problem, okay, in which this case we'll be referring to all the um, like the participants, the settings, how you're going to do this. Okay, you're going to organize. The third step is organize, analyze, and interpret the data. Okay, so basically, your participants, you're going to analyze which scenario you're going to be working on, what you're going to be focusing on, what the main questions are going to be, what is the main interest you have in this project. Okay, then you're going to develop a plan to address the problem. All right, so developing a plan is like making these type of questionnaires, maybe thinking about how is the best way you can collect this data, okay? Then you implement the plan after you analyze and you thought about what you're gonna be asking, what you expect your like your questionnaires, your interviews, what you expect from them, sorry, okay? What are you going to do next? Okay, so the next plan is to evaluate the results of the actions taken. Okay, that's when you're going to do your analysis to see what the results tell you. If you had maybe one hypothesis, but then the results gave you the actual results, well, then that's what you have to be aware of. Okay, then after you did this, you identify a new problem. This is if you continue the investigation. But in this case, we're only going to do one small investigation project. But if you were an investigator, that you would continue investigating different problems from one thing or another thing, especially in education. Maybe your research question is, I don't know, why are native speakers, or how do I, why do native speakers tend, or immigrants from the United States tend to have difficulty in grammar, but not in, I don't know, speech or communication, or I don't know. Okay, that would be another problem. Maybe if you say, okay, they have problems in grammar. Okay, but what can I as a teacher do to enhance their grammar, even though they have well vocabulary, well speaking, pitch, well everything, but the grammar is the one that is seeking. So that's when you identify a new problem, and all this process that I just explained, well, that's, you repeat it again, and then you do the same cycle and look for another problem and another problem. This is if you were like a constant investigator. Well, I think it's like a stairway where you start with one question, you identify the problem, you conclude the problem, and then you continue with another problem. Okay? So this is the cycle of action or cycle of inquiry. Okay?
Okay, and now that let's explain a little bit more of what is action research, what it involves, and the characteristics of action research. I'm going to explain some 4 broad areas of interest proposed by Fisher 2001. If you are a little bit lost, or you have your topic but you don't have it like narrowed, or you want to make it make it a little bit more specific, there are some areas that you can focus on that are some broad areas where you can find a topic that you want to maybe investigate in your action research project. So we have the first area is teaching practice. Here you can think about some problems that may be related to strategies, for example, for teaching vocabulary, pronunciation, or how you give instructions, or problems related to classroom management. So these are more specifically areas you want to improve in your own teaching practice. Then we have the area of learners. Here you are going to focus a little bit more on what are the issues or the factors that are affecting the learning process of your students. For example, their motivation, strategies for them that are most effective. For example, for writing activities or listening activities. So these are more related to learners and their characteristics. The other one is a school curriculum. Here you may find some problems related to the curriculum that you have in your school, that maybe it is mandatory, maybe you are seeing that some topics are not appropriate or appropriate for the level of your students, so you make some adaptations and curriculum. Also here in this road area, we can find, for example, the use of textbooks and how that is helping or affecting your students' learning. Then we have the last area of interest, teachers' beliefs and philosophies. This is more related to the connections that you have with your Okay, I'm going to review the area of teacher beliefs and philosophies. I said that this one is more related to the connections that you have with your own beliefs and the practices. What is behind your practice? What reasons do you have to teach the way you teach? So this one is more related to your own ideas and beliefs. So in my next slide, I'm going to be talking about collecting the data and methods that can help you to know what methods you can use for collecting data. So we have two types of methods. One is observational, and here we can find observation, classroom observation. We can use peer observation if you have a colleague that can help you to do classroom observations. Or maybe it can be self-observation using videos or using audio recordings that can be really helpful for doing observation by yourself. Then we have class notes that are notes that you take while you are in your class. Then we have also transcripts of audios or video recordings that you may use in your classroom. And sociograms are useful, for example, if you are interested in knowing what is seating arrangement or the classroom general arrangement affecting your students. So you can use some sociograms or maps or photographs of your classroom. Then the other category for methods is non-observational. Here you can use classroom materials, for example, handouts or pieces of writing of your students that your students produced. If you are, for example, interested in knowing grammar errors, grammar mistakes, or what is affecting your students' errors and mistakes in writing. Then we have questionnaires. Those are useful for maybe quantifying some data. For example, the likes and dislikes of your students, or maybe also you can ask them some questionnaires of surveys where you have to, or you can ask them some open questions for them to have like an interview, but in a written form. Also, you can use journals. It can be like teacher journals, student journals, or dialogue journals where you are having a conversation, an ongoing conversation with your students. And the final one is interviews, and this can be conversational style or semi-structured interviews or structured interviews. So the type of methods that you're going to use for your research could be related specifically to your research. What is the problem? What data do you want to collect? So you have to find the appropriate kind of methods that you may use in your action research project. So in my next slide, that is related to now that you have the data, how you're to be analyzing it and kind of organized your data. So in this data analysis, here I present you some techniques that may be useful for organizing your data. The first one is identifying themes and patterns. You made an interview and you found some ideas or words that are frequently repeated, or maybe particular students or activities, particular issues, events, locations, maybe behavior. So you can find like some specific patterns, identifying patterns and themes. The next one is coding variable data. For example, if you made some interviews, this one is more related to you're going to be listening and repeating the data. So you can find some key categories in the data. And you can also include some categories that may be useful for organizing your data. Then the other one is narrating your observation. This is related to if you made some observations, how you're going to present that data in your project. This one is related to how you're going to present the observation, how you're going to analyze it and organizing it. So you can use a chronological sequence that is like the process, what happened first, what happened then in your observation, what did you observe in your classroom. The next one is selective, maybe for example, some key incidents that happened in your and also you can use particular analyzing the observation. In this particular, this is related to a specific case that you want to focus on. For example, some specific students, a specific activity. So you only use the data that is really particular situation that you want to analyze. And the key or the important factor in data collection and data analysis of cycles, you may have in the first cycle one set of So section research is a cycle or is made of cycles. Maybe in the first cycle you have a set of information or data analysis that you did, and you have some interpretations of that data. But as it is a cycle, and maybe you can continue with the process of action research, you may find some other data, some other factors, some other interpretations in further cycles that may change the order or the general understanding of the data. So you have to have an open mind because it is going to change at some point. If you are doing action research, it is important to know if you are going to collect some more data in further cycles. So in the next slide is the final step for presenting your results. In this step, well, it is where once you have done your data analysis, you may find some factors, some findings that may help you to go to the conclusion of your action research project. And in this stage of presenting your findings, I think it is important for action research because action research is like the bridge that closes the gap between researchers and teachers. So it is important that you present your findings, you share what you learned from this situation. But while you are presenting your findings, it is important that in the article, in the paper, if you are going to write a paper like in this class, it is important that you make sure to describe very well the background, because as it is action research, it is going to be very specific. The context is going to be very specific, the situation and the reasons why you did action research and in this specific issue. So you have to be very careful to include all the details in the background section where you're going to describe what is your context like, why did you select that specific topic, and why it is important for you to solve, why action research was helpful for solving that issue. Also, you have to include the process of research. I think it is like a general characteristic that you have to include in an article, but specifically related to action research, you have to make sure that you are including how many cycles did you did, the whole process, what changed, and if you have like an initial plan and then you had to change it because you had some incidents, some things that you found during the cycles. So it is very important that you present the process of the research, because action research can change from cycle to cycle. And finally, it is not always like perfect, the method of action research. So it is important to make sure that you have some specific information that will help you to enhance the advantages of action research, and some aspects that you have to be careful is presented well. So for that, I think Laura is going to present some important aspects that we have to consider to make sure that action research is presenting the most the advantages of the process. So Laura.
Yes. So let's start with this. Since action research has become very popular in the last years, well, you know, when something becomes so popular, there are many people who want to criticize it, and action research has become a point of critiques. So we're going to take a look at some critiques that have been done to action research, if it's valid, if it's not, or why it is considered as a valid approach or not. So, well, in this next slide, we're gonna begin with this points of view. So basically, here we have some contrast between some other research approaches and action research. Um, so many researchers do not agree that an approach to the research should have like very well-established procedures, like very predictable processes when you're doing the research. And as Liz and Alo have been mentioning, action research is very dynamic and is very flexible, and it's got many types of cycles. Like at least it's got 30 different cycles of planning, action, observation, and reflection. So for some other researchers, this is like too much because you basically have to be open to the changes. As a researcher, like and doing action research may conduct to the researcher to be prepared to unanticipated variations in the process. So things may change throughout the process, throughout the research. And it's also a challenge for novice researchers because they have to distinguish how action research differs from everyday educational practice. Everyday action processes of research are brought together in action research. Hence, well, the researcher must plan, act, observe, and reflect, but I mean, all of this has to be done more rigorously than one usually does in everyday life. So in this next slide, we have these four main points that we need to consider when we want to evaluate the quality of action research. So the first one is cross-checking perspectives. Then we have testing through practical actions, compatibility with educational aims and democratic human values, and compatibility with teaching demands. So we're going to start with cross-checking perspective, which we have in this next slide. So this point has like this other four concepts. We first began with triangulation. So basically, this means that we need to use more than one data collection method, or we need to make more comparisons across different types of data. When I say a data collection method, well, I talk about, I don't know, observation or interviews or the questionnaires or this type of methods that I think Alo talked about. And when we talk about different types of data, well, we talk about, I don't know, quantitative analysis, compare with the qualitative responses, for example. So by using, let's say, two different methods or more, we may get to the same result. So this will give certain validity to action research. So then we have member checks. This point basically talks about that we need to take the data to several participants or some other stakeholders in order to verify the accuracy of our findings. So the researchers' interpretations are cross-checked by these other people, maybe people who supply the data context, so they can they are in the position to provide different points of view. These people can be the principal, administrators, or some close colleagues. So by doing this member check, we are going to give credibility to our findings. When we talk about perspective comparison, we basically refer to that we need to test our findings against some research in comparable situations. We need to take some sources which come from literature, conferences, workshop, even some other researchers' reflection. This is with the aim of finding some negative cases or some failures so we can show some other alternatives or explanations. And well, finally, we have a cyclical iteration. And well, this is basically like the findings and interpretations are compared and tested against some previous iterations of action research cycles. And we do this in order to expand the scope the purpose and the central questions of our study. And then in the next slide, we have like the second point that we discussed at the beginning, which is testing through practical application. So as Liz and Alo have said, action research is basically, or most likely is based on experiential knowledge. But we need to consider that action research is not only practical, it also involves empirical and theoretical insights about the social situation which is being investigated. Hence, it's important to mention that theory is needed to demonstrate that a practical application is for the research improvement. And this will promote critical reflection or critical thinking. Hence, is not only like practical and it's not only about theory. We need to have a balance between theory and practice in order to have good action research. Then in this next slide, we have this topic, which is compatibility with educational aims and democratic human values. So this one relates more to ethical considerations. We know that, well, we need to keep in mind that when we are doing action research, we are dealing or training with people, with humans. So action research leads to enhance cooperative participant relationships, and it's very important to show how these relationships were treated while we were doing the research. So this is like a very relevant and important part in our research. So we need to indicate how ethical principles were achieved in the different cycles of our research. So like this is an essential part of action research. And finally, in the next slide, we have compatibility with teaching demands. So this part talks about mostly about professionalism. Action research practitioners must be simultaneously researchers and actors in the social situation. Like they also become participants. Sometimes they have to reflect about it. They have to understand what's going on. Hence, the scope and names of the research need to be realistic and justifiable in the constraints of the teaching context. So the research should show how it links the notion of enhanced professionalism for educators and the personal and professional development of the participants. And well, finally, we have the conclusion. Liz is gonna give the conclusion.
All right, so well, first, I think I'll go back a little. Our brief conclusion as a team, we consider that action research is a great tool to enhance different type of practices, because since it's an ongoing cycle, the research never ends, neither the reflection, okay? And I hope you guys liked it and understood it, and these are our references. And thank you very much. That's it for today.
Thank you.
Thank you.